couple adventurers. My name is Sam Gerke. I'm an artist, I'm a mentor, and I started this interview series, hashtag Creative Innovators. And today we're talking with Jenny Cavanaugh-Bond from Inky Paws. So Jenny, just quick, not quick, go into it. Tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself, your favorite creative outlet, and how long you've been doing it, that kind of stuff.
Okay. I am actually really excited about this, possibly a little too excited. I'm Jenny, as Tammy has already said, and I'm a mixed media artist and creativity mentor-y type thing. You can find me at Inky Paws Art, and basically what do I do? Well, pretty much anything I can get my hands on, anything creative. A lot of mixed media stuff, but I also enjoy embroidery. I do scrapbooking. I'll just mess around with paint for the hell of it. I like experimenting. And as for how long I've been doing it, since I was able to put handprints down, the earliest photos of me is as a little in nappies, going hand to hand across a freshly plastered wall with blue paint.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, that's awesome. So you've got pictures, your parents have pictures of you with blue handprints going across the wall. That is absolutely great. I was gonna say when did you get started, but obviously that tells us. So your favorite creative outlet is mixed media. Have you tried anything else? I mean, what got you started in mixed media?
So when I was growing up, a lot of it was like poster paint and watercolors, like the kids stuff. As I got older, I continued doing art at school. And of course that led into acrylics. And I also took a watercolor class as well. Bought me some watercolor paint because he'd done watercolor when he was younger and quite enjoyed it. And my grandfather went through fads. So he would be all about watercolor, but all the kids had to have some as well, and watercolor paints. And I've dabbled in oils. And what I found is I don't sort of lean towards one type of media, but I don't want to just stick with watercolor. I like the technicalities of it. I enjoy it. Same with acrylic paint. I love being able to layer up those paints. But why stop at just one? You can create such unusual techniques when you start to mix things together, and whole other opportunity. I mean, working with oils, but they have their place in mixed media.
I agree. You can take all different kinds of things and put them together, as long as you're putting them in the right layers, because some with others, if you put them on top of each other, which I learned the hard way. But yeah, there's so much fun because you can do so many cool things. Yeah. So what else would you like to explore? I mean, are there other, mixed media is such a broad things, broad art form, and you can bring so many things in, but are there other things? You said you've done knitting. Are there other things outside of painting that you tried to explore, or that increase your creativity?
Yeah, I do quite a bit of scrapbooking. For me, it's not so much about keeping the memories, it's about making a pretty picture, playing around with paper. And it's not as messy, but still just as expansive. And trying to, it's a really good way of color mixing almost, because you've got different colors of paper, different patterns of paper, and you find things that work, what things don't work, and why it doesn't work with your eye. So that really moved me a lot in terms of color, and also understanding paper. I'm a real paper geek. It's quite ridiculous, but I love the technicalities of paper, and scrapbooking taught me a lot about the quality of paper, the dye that's used in paper, what happens when you chuck too much paint at your paper and it's not designed for that. So yeah, I did that. And also embroidery and cross stitch. So counter cross stitch is really just a mindless switch off for me. I can, it's closed. I wouldn't recommend it because you'll stick yourself with the needle, but I can do it with my eyes closed. It's easy. drew within my mixed media, so it starts to come in a little bit, especially with French knots. It's where I've done the middle of the flowers with French knots and everything else is paint. So I a lot. Start to pull different things in. Oh, that would look good with that. That would, and running the sewing machine over. So they all start to sort of merge into one big thing, in different strands of it, in a pot of creativity for me.
So you've gone, because most people, when you think of mixed media, they think of different types of paint. They think, you know, texture. They think, you know, you can put all kinds of, you know, paper pieces on there, or I've taken like metal pieces and put on there. But you're taking sewing and, you know, cross stitch and painting, and I mean, you're not just mixing medium, you're mixing creative outlets as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
pretty much.
definitely cool. So what made you first realize that this type of art, that mixed media, was something that you enjoyed most?
Oh, crikey. Well, I started following a mixed media artist. I was like, I really like what they're doing. And that artist is does a lot of collage work. And as kids, we did collage a lot. I mean, my grandfather was a journalist, so there was always newspaper around. So it was either collage or paper mache. Things you can do with that. I was like, yeah, I can do that. And it became a bit of a springboard. I started with very flat, and then it started to be, hang on, I want a bit more structure to it. It needs more texture. Right, how can I get texture? Let's add some fabric. Yeah, let's add some paste to it. Actually, how thick can I make this layer? Sort of started as something a lot more 2D and evolved. It was more a, how can I use this? How can I use that? Oh, I haven't got what I wanted. Right, backtrack a bit. Where to next? What went wrong? And there was a lot of trial and error. And I suppose it goes back to childhood of anything can be, I mean, anything can be created into something else. Big fans of literally raiding the recycling bin, getting out all these toilet roll tubes and making little, almost. So it almost harks back to that, and it screams to the inner child of, yes, I enjoyed this.
I love that.
Oh,
Yeah, it's taking a bunch of media,
yeah.
and a lot of things that people don't even think of. It sounds to me like creativity has always been a positive influence in your life, that you really haven't had that many negative experiences. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's very, very true. And it's something whilst I've been building into pause to a certain extent, because I see so many people who won't create it, all of these things, there's something holding them back. And I sat down and I was thinking, well, why do I find it so easy? You know, because for me, it is easy, it's innate. And it was then I realized how much nurturing my mum had done and my grandparents had done by allowing me that space to be creative. I was never told to not make a mess. I was encouraged to make a mess. The worst thing that I'm going to do is be covered in paint and be showered down. I mean, it was never a big deal. But I hear so many people who have said to me, oh, I was never allowed to do that. Oh, my mum would never let me do this. And I've witnessed it with some of my friends who have kids now who say, no, you can only paint if you keep it on this little square of paper. It's like, no, let them have the fun, let them play, because that's how you learn. And I've had the only bad experiences I had with creativity were my art teacher at school, who was a very, very good painter, but he wasn't a good artist in the sense of all art is subjective. And if he didn't like it, then it wasn't good enough. So it's the only time I've ever really been put down. And with it being school, it was quite a vulnerable time for me. So I'm surprised it didn't have more of a negative impact, but I suspect because by that age, I was 13, 14, I could knit, I could sew, I could do embroidery, I could paint, I could do 2D, I could do 3D. Gave you acrylics and said, get on with it. And a bad thing, but his attitude towards it, if he didn't like it, was very, oh well, it's just not good enough. And I know a lot of my peer group who just ran away, taken any further, they don't want anything to do with it. Art is so personal. Anything, we judge it, and we freak out about those judgments. I suppose it was so innate for me, it was so well nurtured by that point, that I could brush off that criticism that I couldn't in other areas of life. Within my creative world, I've always been able to do that.
You broke up. I didn't hear the last piece. I'm sorry. Within your creative world, what?
I've always been able to sort of brush off that criticism and, well, I'm going to paint this.
So with that teacher, I was going to ask you how that affected your art, but it doesn't sound like it affected your art. I mean, because you were so well nurtured with your mom, that your mom and your grandparents, that that negative teacher didn't have that strong of an influence on your art. Everything else, I mean, as far as everything else.
Yeah, he had a big impact on me for about the 2 or 3 years whilst I was doing my GCSEs, which is one of the qualifications you get at school over here in the UK. And for that period, he did have quite a big influence, and I was quite timid in my artwork. I didn't stray far from acrylic and canvas. I explored watercolor as a medium. I wasn't very adventurous with it though. And it was about 3 or 4 years of being very, very unadventurous, to the point where I sort of tailed off from painting in any capacity. And I went into needlework. That was, I could do more freeform and get, I suppose, we'll crave a bit of praise every so often for our efforts. And I would get that with the textile artwork I was doing, but artwork, because I'm not a fine artist in all fairness. Just how I create more than my ability to create.
So it did affect your art, but as far as your adventurous side of your creativity, it kind of sounds like it almost kind of put you in a box for a little while until you realize I don't need to be in this box. It kind of restricted you a little bit.
Yeah, it restricted me quite a lot in terms of I probably could have done at that time. I felt that I couldn't explore the mediums in the way I wanted to. Anything that was east and not thoroughly influenced by masters wasn't good enough for him. And that was very difficult for me. I've always been influenced by things. I've always found inspiration in things, but I've never been in a position since or before that time where I've been told you must be influenced by X, Y, or Z. That really constrained me, and I felt very chained in. So I went off and I explored other things, and just did what I needed to keep him most. But it wasn't as much fun as it could have been, and that kind of not depresses me. It's almost like it was an opportunity that I learned a lot from it. And I learned that I didn't have to be constrained like that. I understand why he did what he did. But it's not an experience I would ever want to repeat, or feel that anyone should have to repeat.
Yeah, I agree. I think I know what you mean. It's when you've got someone that, I mean, for all intents and purposes, he's trying to help you, but because he was so restricted in his views of art and what it should mean, he's restricting yours as a young artist. And I think you having the wherewithal, because you've had previous, positive experiences, you, yes, allowed it to influence you in a little bit, but didn't allow it to influence you completely so that you stopped, which I know that that's a big for some kids and even some adults who take a, a class and the teacher's in a particular way and they don't draw that way, they don't paint that way. And because the teacher is that way, they think that that's how it's supposed to be structured. And it's not always the case. You know, we're all completely different. We all learn completely different. And we all, like you said, art is subjective. It's all different. Obviously, we all have problems with like motivation and focus and procrastination. You know, all the big perfection, all those big issues that we have. Do you have any like little tips or tricks of things that you do to help those obstacles when it comes to creating your artwork?
Yeah, I suppose for me, the biggest thing is people being perfectionists. I'm not so much as a perfectionist as other members of my other members of my family are. I was always the one that would half-ass my way through life, quite happily. But I do have a bit of a perfectionist streak, and I did have for a very long time, especially when I was going through my art lessons and we did life drawing. I struggled so much with life drawing. It was horrific. I just could not get the proportions to work. It completely eluded me, and it was so frustrating for me that it was one artistic endeavor that I just couldn't do. I couldn't draw lifelike portraits, and it bugged the crap out of me. And I refused point blank for about 7 or 8 years to draw or even attempt faces or still lifes, because I couldn't do that. I convinced myself I couldn't do it, and it became a very, very limiting belief, a very blocked area of creativity for me. I had other areas, but that was completely blocked. And I started to look at ways for other people to let go of perfectionism. And it was whilst I was doing that stretch of work that I realized, hang on, this perfectionist streak is holding me back in this area. Okay, how can I change it? So I started looking at how to draw faces, and I didn't do a bad job. It wasn't fantastic, and you'll see with some of the artwork that I've got how that's changed in just 6-7 months almost. Because it was only a year ago I really got through this particular block, so it's quite a recent one for me. And I started to be able to draw the shapes rather than looking at the person and trying to get this lifelike image. I realized if I want a lifelike image, there are better ways for me to get it. I can take a photo. If I want to create a lifelike image, that's a lot of time and patience, and I don't have that time. I don't have that patience. I'm not a patient artist. Stretch of imagination. The longer it takes me to create something, the more fed up I get with it, because I'm like, will you just dry already? But techniques for me to overcome this perfectionist streak with it, and I had a real breakthrough. Drew a face with my non-dominant hand, so I'm right-handed. I'm not ambidextrous. I have no motor skills in my left hand whatsoever, apart from being able to pick up a glass and hold things. There's no real dexterity. And I drew a face with my non-dominant hand, and I did it with a pencil initially, and then I went over with a thick black tip permanent pen. So I couldn't rub out anything. I couldn't change anything. Those lines were fixed. And I worked through that, and I actually created quite, it wasn't lifelike, but it's a person, it's a face. But it worked, and I worked through that, and it really helped me let go of this issue I had that was really blocking me in that area. So for me, it's let go of perfectionism and also give yourself permission to try.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We have who don't start. They don't. So when did you decide you wanted to share your work with the world? I mean, were you nervous? Were you anxious, excited? What made you decide, okay, now I want to start sharing what I'm making? Or is it something that you've just always shown everybody?
I was terrified. Terrified. I was always the one that, look what we made, look what we did, look what we did, look what we did. And as I went through school, and actually this is probably where that teacher had one of the biggest influences on me, we didn't show off work. It was all kept hidden in a sketchbook. There was very little displayed. It was hidden. And you didn't start sharing your work at all because you started getting those comparisons, and children can be mean, and especially when we hit teenage years, very, very mean people. And it's part of finding yourself, but an impact when people start judging your work and say, oh, that looks awful. Class, we tended to not show anyone anything. And I started doing a scrapbooking blog back in 2008 when I was really heavily scrapbooking, and I didn't get a lot of traction with it. Again, put me back again with sharing, because nobody wanted to see it, was my interpretation of that. And I know that's not true, but that's how I felt about it at the time. And the blog was, funnily enough, Inky Paws, because I was covered in paint and ink. Even scrapbooking, I was covered in ink. And it was about a year ago, I was like, well, I've had some amazing experiences through creativity, helping me heal old wounds. I find it very cathartic to work through my crap on paper, throwing paint around. And, I don't always get something pretty out of it, but I'll work through a lot of stuff doing it. Whether it's anger, whether it's fear, whether it's pain, joy, whatever, I get a lot out of the process rather than the finished piece. And I wanted to give other people the opportunity to start getting that experience. I see so many people, and over the years I've become members of different forums, different groups. Oh, I could never do that when somebody posts artwork. And I hear it a lot, I'm like, you could, why not? Yeah, it will not be the same as mine, but that's not the point. It's about the process. It's not about the finished result. I mean, the finished result is nice, yeah, but the hours that go into that, you don't see the pain, you don't see the grief, you don't see the frustration. You just see a pretty end piece. But whoever's made it has spent potentially hours on this piece of artwork, pouring their soul into it. And that experience, that process, is the healing part of art. That's what makes art. So it's all well and good saying, oh, well, I can't. Well, have you even tried to? And it's like one of my mates said, oh, I can't do that. I can't even draw a stick figure. I'm sitting there going, in 3 bloody straight lines, you can draw a stick figure. Which is my favorite.
Yeah, I so completely agree with you. And it's funny because my next question was going to be, what are your suggestions or your ideas or your thoughts or advice that you could give someone who doesn't feel like they're creative? And you blew it out of the water. I mean, that was absolutely perfect, because you and I are both on the same page. We are so much alike, and that's obviously why we get along so well. In our views on how everyone is creative, how frustrated we get when someone says, I can't draw like that, or I can't draw a stick figure, and you just nailed it. I mean, that was absolutely perfect. Now, we just talked to someone yesterday who, with his art, he's wanting to do it just because he wants to keep it fun. He wants to keep it as a hobby. And we also know that there are those others of us who want to make something of it. We want to sell our art. We want to be out into the world and, sharing our work with others. What kind of advice do you have for someone who wants to take that path of making their creativity?
Give yourself permission. Stage in your life, you need to give yourself permission to take that next step, whatever it is, whether it's setting up a website. I mean, a year ago, coding knowledge whatsoever, I couldn't even imagine building a website, and I have built my own website. But nobody else is going to give you permission, and as children we're taught to seek permission. But when we grow up, in us that we need permission to do something, and that's where a lot of this "oh, I could never" comes into it. First steps, and the only way to take those first steps is to give yourself permission to take those steps. And if you need to write out a permission slip, and I did this months back, and I haven't even released it to my guys. I've actually made up some permission slips that I give myself permission to for so many hours, signed da da da. You could do that. It doesn't matter how you give yourself permission, whether you need that visual or whether you can just say it in your head. Giving yourself permission is one of the strongest things you can do to break that cycle and to move forward.
And that seems like such a simple thing, but when you think about, you know, showing your work and moving forward and moving into that next step, you're right. Because we say we can't, but then we don't bother asking why can't we? And when we think about it and get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's because we feel like we have to have somebody else's approval or somebody else is okay to be able to do that. So you yourself, I have an idea already. What legacy do you want to leave this world with your creativity?
What kind of legacy? It sounds trite, but if I can change just one person's life, my story and sharing my work, that would be amazing for me. However, I actually know that I have changed 2 or 3 people's lives already, so that for me is just ginormous. My legacy would be for everyone to be able to pick up a paintbrush and give it a shot. Doesn't matter what comes out the end of that brush, whether it's good, bad, ugly, give it a shot. Get creating and do something.
Oh my God.
You know, it could be writing. No,
I'm
could be writing.
I'm gonna cry because I know I feel the exact same way, and that's what I think is so absolutely amazing about you is that, I mean, as another artist and someone who's painting, who's doing the same things that you're doing, you've affected my life. And so anytime, and for those who don't know, Jenny and I are like on the same page. We're accountability partners. We kick each other's butts. And that the kind of relationship that we have is what you need. You have to have support system, and you have to have people in your life who are not going to just, you know, kind of pat you on the back. Oh, baby, that's okay. No, that are going to tell you what you need to hear, even though you don't want to hear it, who are going to be honest with you, give you constructive criticism, who are going to give you the support that you need. And a person, she's the type of person who, loving and sweet, as adorable as anything, but will kick you in the butt if you need to. And that's what, as artists, I think that's what we really, really need. I would love for you to show some of your art. Show us what you've been working on, what you have in store, what you've got planned, and then we'll be able to round out this interview. I had so much fun. Sorry.
Okay, so showing my artwork, where to start? Because I am quite prolific when I start creating. Ages ago, I'll try this, I'll try that, I'll try the other. Portraiture and me not being able to draw faces. So we're going to go there. So, very early ones. Okay, it is very basic, and it's one of the very. I finally figured out how to draw a face.
She's beautiful.
She's lovely. I'm so proud of that one. But it's one of the very first ones I ever did that sort of. I've cracked it. It's not just a little bit. I've cracked it. So that's where my journey kind of started. This is where it is now.
Oh, wow.
Which is totally different. But that's my journey. People forget, and people will see this and say, oh, wow, it's brilliant. Always been able to draw like that. I haven't. I've come on this journey. And my really early on attempts, which I don't think I actually have any in here, are, quite frankly, literally stick figure type faces, because I could not get my head around it. They're out of proportion. The eyes are too far apart. They just don't look right. But the other one I want to show you in that little series is the one where I said I'd done with my non-dominant hand. And this is how I really sort of kicked my perfectionism's butt. And that, like I say, was drawn with a black, with my left hand. I coloured in everything with my right hand. So I did revert to my, it was a process of, okay, I now have these thick black lines. How do I make this work? And she's not symmetrical. And if I was to do it with my right hand, it should have looked totally different. But so yeah, that's kind of part of my journey in faces. It kind of highlights.
That's beautiful though, because even with your left hand, that's a gorgeous painting. I know so many artists who purposely with their dominant hand paint out of proportion, and that even just doing it on your own with your non-dominant hand, she's beautiful.
The best bit about that was the idea was to trick my brain into, it's not going to be good because it's my non-dominant hand. It's not going to be good because it's got these thick black lines in it. Way beyond my expectations, but your expectations tend to limit you in art. So it's a really good way to get around those expectations that you have. I want to go over to mixed media now, like proper full-blown mixed media. I love 3D stuff and texture. A couple of these. So this is one I did months ago, and it's fabric and metal elements. I love it so much. There's just so much texture in there.
God, I want to touch it. It's so gorgeous.
It's so pretty. I'm really chuffed with it because I think I've released the making video on my YouTube, and this was shades of green, orange, and purple. Right. And now it's not. It's got these pinky purples and it's much more toned down. But it was a process of working through a really ugly face and giving myself permission to, okay, I don't like this, right, let's change it. Rules. Permission to change your mind. What else have I got? I know you like this one because you've seen this one before.
Yes, that's one of my favorites. I love that.
This one. And this bit is a demo piece. I had so much fun doing it, but it wasn't intended as anything other than to try paper. And it worked really well, I'm pleased to say. But yeah, a lot of my work is very, very 3D. I've got to show you this. This is one of my favorites.
Wow.
It was cool. Really good fun. And I've actually released this as a class on its own. Fun to do. It really was. I just built texture, and a lot of it is paper and recycled elements. I mean, yes, the focal point is, but majority of it is paper and packaging. A few bits of metal elements and some beads. Necklace. So yeah, it's good fun. It's amazing what you can do to just build that depth and build that texture. And I'll show you one final one, which is really unusual. So my husband's a real geek, as Tammy knows. He's a proper computer nerd. And we have huge, big cardboard box full of spare modems, game console, that kind of thing. So anyone who has kids or a husband like mine is everywhere. So I rated it and said, right, I've had enough of this box. Sort out what's obsolete, and I'm having that. And then everything else can go to wherever. So I've stolen from him so many of these obsolete cards, and I'd make them into art now.
Oh, that's awesome.
I stick circuit boards. This is literally, I stuck down some circuit boards and a compass, covered it in black gesso, and then I've just got two paint colors on that. I've got this rust and this blue. That's it. There's nothing technical or complicated. Your kids can do that. Cool at the end.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I have a whole ton of art pieces, of computer pieces. I'm going to have the kids making some pieces now. Oh my God, that's absolutely awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Oh, I had so much fun. This was absolutely spectacular. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you
What
for
I'm
having
going to do, of course, I'm going to have Jenny's information down at the bottom with, I already have some of it with her contact information. I know she's on Inky Paws Art at Inky Paws on Instagram, Inky Paws on Periscope, and I will have her contact information down there if you want to get on her website and check it out. She has some phenomenal pieces out there, classes, courses. She's an amazing mentor, art mentor. She's like me. She will get your butt going and doing what you need to do. And so all that information to be able to contact her is going to be down at the bottom. Again, Jenny, thank you so very much. I really appreciate your giving me your time and interviewing you. Can you say?
Thank you very much, Tammy. It's been delightful.